Welcome everyone to CRM MVP podcast episode number 99. We're almost there. We're almost there to episode number 100. But today we're going to continue on that theme that we started with episode 97, where we went over all of the functionality from the sales application. Well, at least 10 things within the sales application. And we had Matt Whitman and Neil Benson review those features and kind of talk about whether their customers are actually using these features from back in the day. Some of these were introduced back 10 years ago or whatever, and we were talking about how valuable those features are in the real world. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the customer service application. And once again, we have a list of 10 things that we're going to review and talk about whether our customers are using that. Now, once again, I didn't want to do this review on my own. I invited two business applications MVPs. I still call it CRM MVPs. I'm old school like that. But we have EY and Trisha. Welcome, guys, to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we're going to be reviewing this functionality together. We all get to chime in and talk about our experience implementing the customer service application. Before we get started, though, I want people to understand why you guys are here. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the customer service application, how long you've been working with Dynamics, and all that good stuff? Let's start with you, EY.
Hi, so I'm EY Kalman, also known as the CRM Ninja. That's the t-shirt, all about the brand. I've been working with CRM since version 3.0. I was at a ISV that was doing it. They were customizing it for certain verticals, the fuel oil sector and the accountancy sector. And they were basing it around customer service because with the market being saturated, it's all about keeping the customer retention. Customer's a problem. What can you do about it? What can you do to resolve it? So cases and other stuff like that. And it was really just built around that. And I've seen through my career, and it's spanning over a decade or so, those organizations which really care about customer service are the ones that keep the customers. And in fact, the customers then go out and market those companies. So it's free advertising, free marketing for them. So really, really passionate about customer service, about enabling and empowering companies to be able to do it for their customers. And yeah, that's sort of where I come from.
That's awesome. How about you, Trisha?
Well, so my journey is a little bit different. I actually started my customer service journey back when I was at university because I worked in a call center. I worked in several different call centers. And then when I started my career in tech, I actually started in a CRM company. And that CRM company did Dynamics, they did Sales Logics and others, other CRM applications. So I've been exposed to not only customer service in Dynamics, but also how other products deliver it. And of course, as EY said, customer service is extremely important and has actually evolved in how it's important and how it's delivered throughout the years. And it's really just interesting to see how Dynamics have actually, CRM to Dynamics have actually grown with the trend of how customer service is delivered. So I've actually got over 10 years of experience in the dynamic space, as I mentioned, starting from CRM, actually from CRM4, because I really started with Sage. So I was a little bit late coming to Microsoft. But I don't think that's any bad because at least I know how the different products actually all deliver the different pieces. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, the three of us, I started also with CRM 3.0 for a very, very, very brief period of time. I was a CRM administrator for CRM 3.0 at the company I was working for. And then when I moved to being more on the pro side, working for a partner, that's when I went into CRM 4.0 and so on, 2011 eventually, and then online. But we've seen the application evolve over time. Like back in the day when we got started with Dynamics, we kind of knew everything. You knew everything that was possible with it. You knew sales and customer service and marketing and kind of everything there was to it. It was actually interesting every time you learned something new. I don't know if you guys remember, but they will teach you something new and you're like, I didn't know you can do that, because you kind of felt like you knew everything that was there. But, after 2011, I feel like Dynamics has been on a nonstop growth and evolution, essentially. And when it comes to customer service, there's a lot of things that have changed. And I'm curious to hear how you guys are coping and using, some of this functionality that we have that has evolved over time, and some of it that, hasn't really changed a whole lot. So let's start talking about are 10 things in the customer service application that has evolved over time and how we use it. And the first one that we're going to talk about is the knowledge base. The knowledge base has been through some changes. Back in the day, it was just articles that we created, and there wasn't any versioning or anything. I remember that it's the first time I felt like there was a process to it. Like you had to write it and then submit it for approval and all of that, which in the real world, by the way, I don't know if this is how you guys feel, but it was always the same person doing all of this. Like the same person will write it, review it, approve it, publish it, everything. There wasn't like a committee, which is, I think, the original intent, but it was only one person. And then, with the acquisition of Parature, which I believe it happened around 2013, 2014, the knowledge based capabilities from Parature kind of came to Dynamics and replace half-assertly replace the knowledge base that was there before, to a point where we ended up with two. One was like closer to the top of the form in the case form, and the other one was like still at the bottom. It was kind of weird, but we ended up with an enhanced version of the knowledge base. And Trisha, I want you to talk about what the current version of the knowledge base does, and then let's talk about whether we see this being used in the real world and how.
Well, the beauty about the current version of the knowledge base is, as you mentioned briefly, versioning. But not only versioning, it's being able to convert cases that you've actually resolved to knowledge articles, and also providing feedback on the current knowledge articles as well. So, how we actually used it in a previous project is, I know you said that there would be one person doing the knowledge articles, but in the last company that I worked at, it was an insurance company, and they actually did it by people submitting feedback. So, based on feedback, they identified, oh, there is actually a need for a particular knowledge article. Then they'd build out the knowledge article. So, it was actually a life cycle, and they properly used that whole version control and the approvals for that. So, we did actually see that being used quite well, as well as I think the feedback functionality, which not a lot of people are aware of or actually use.
EY, have you seen the knowledge base being used these days, and how?
We have indeed. So, one of the sectors that I've been working in for the last couple of years, consulting into, has been the local authority space. So, your local council or large regional councils. And part of what they try and do when they move to is the aim of the citizen self service. So members of the public can go onto their local council website. They can find information. What is the rubbish collection? When is it coming to pick up? What about my utilities and the rest of it, and bills and things like that? And one of the amazing things about knowledge articles is they can be published externally. So it's possible to have them maintained internally with all the versioning, that you and Tricia just mentioned, and the controls of that. But they can be surfaced externally, so I can go on the website and see those and access them, and give some feedback on there. And that also flows through. I mean, knowledge articles are able to be used by customer service agents within Omnichannel for customer service. So somebody having a live chat with a customer support agent can go away and use knowledge articles to find the exact information they want. So those are just two of the scenarios, but we're definitely seeing a lot more use of those sort of things.
For sure. And there's some other capabilities, obviously, that are part of the knowledge base. Some of it I've used, some of it I haven't really used. It's like, when COVID started and there were articles about like how dolphins were swimming around the canals in Venice. I mean, was that true or not? Like, I don't really know. It's kind of like, it's cool to believe, but you don't really know. Like, for example, I think that on the knowledge base, you can now have articles in multiple languages. And based on the user that is resolving the case, it can understand the language. And when you include it in an email, it will include the right language matching the user. Like, that sounds like it should be a thing, and it should be there. But I've never actually used it myself. So it's kind of like that dolphin story.
Ah,
But
I think
the
that's
capability of
unicorn.
sending, you've used it, Trisha?
No, I said that sounds like a unicorn.
I know, but it's there. Like, you're supposed to be able to have the same version of a knowledge base in multiple languages, and it's supposed to be able to read. If the user has, let's say Spanish, then include the Spanish version into the email that you're sending out or whatever.
Well,
Um,
I know you can do it. Like, so I know we've done different languages for knowledge
mhm.
articles, but if the user is so different languages and on a portal, yes, that's true. It will actually translate the knowledge articles and show the relevant one, but not from the agent side. From the agent side, it actually, from my understanding, and the last time I checked, it uses the version of the English. So if the English is English, it doesn't matter if the customer is Spanish, it sends the English version. But it might have updated, it might have changed.
Yeah, I haven't used it, so I'm just talking about my what my understanding is from back in the day when it was introduced. But the capabilities of
Yeah.
emailing them out, posting them to your portal, selecting which ones are private articles versus publicly facing articles. All that stuff is in there, which is pretty cool. And there was an enhancement made to it too, where out of the box we had metrics for knowledge based articles to show like which articles were used for different cases. Like you can measure over time which ones were your most popular knowledge based
Yeah.
articles and stuff like that. So I feel that they added a lot of functionality, but it's one of those things that I feel is not widely used. Like, and if I think about all the customer service implementations I've done, a very small amount of them actually leverage the knowledge base.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There was one thing that has been in the customer service and it hasn't really changed over time, which is the subject, the ability to select the subject in the case entity. And the subject has been in Dynamics, again, as far as I can remember, is the only field that we can actually use that looks like a tree. Where you pick a subject and then there's some sub subjects underneath, and then you can keep drilling in until you pick what this case is about. And I think the case entity is the only one that comes with it out of the box that is already on the form. But the subject is available really anywhere. If you add it as a lookup in any other entity, you can connect to it. But have you guys seen the subject being used for anything within customer service, just out there in the real world?
I don't use
So
it.
you don't use it. So we've seen it used. The problem with subject is you can only pick one subject. And if you think of modern systems, you want to like put tags in it. Think of Azure DevOps with or project boards. You can tag with multiple tags. You know what it is, and you can search on it. With a subject, it's only one, and the reporting on it is, I don't see as being particularly good around it. Users want to be able to again tag cases with multiple tags and things like that to be able to see and then get metrics on there. So it's definitely a limitation from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the fact that you can only tie one subject to a case, but there's no way to trace it back is what makes reporting so difficult. You can't really report at a higher, point within the subject hierarchy. So if you have the subject split into hardware and software, for example, and each one of them has subjects underneath, if you pick one of those, you can't just go back and say, "Show me all my cases by hardware and software." It will not know that you know electrical problems were inside of hardware. It doesn't know any of that, and that's what makes it difficult. But I do think that Microsoft believes in the functionality behind subjects to the point that the out of the box case form has a grid that shows you similar cases, and it has that label that says similar cases. And as far as I can tell, the only driving force behind populating that grid is the fact that they are the same subject cases. So if your subject was, I don't know, SQL error, then any other case that you had with SQL error will show up on that, on that grid as a potential similar case. I guess if
Mm.
you get really intricate and detailed with your subjects, that could be pretty useful, right? If you go exactly, let's say you have a, I don't know, your Tesla, and your subject includes things like, you know, passenger side window or something like that level of detail, then other passenger side window cases or problems will pop up. And I mean, they could be similar. So I guess it all
Mm.
depends on how detailed you get with it for it to work. But for the most part, this is one of those things that we just remove.
I think
Um,
for me though, for similar cases, it's great, and yeah, it does default to subject, but I always change that to like, for example, like case title contains and stuff like that, because you can do that. But subject, I think it's, I see where they're going with it, I do, because obviously, as you mentioned, it's used throughout all the areas of Dynamics, from like campaigns to leads to to products. It's just generally used. The problem is it is used in all those areas. So therefore, that list is just going to grow if you're going to use it. And therefore, it just increases the amount of clicks and removes the usability that an agent will need to have. Because bear in mind, it's all about KPIs. So if you're dealing with the KPI of an agent, you want to reduce the clicks, not add to it.
Absolutely. And I wish we could create that same effect of subject inside our own custom fields. Like, for example, how cool would it be if you could nest, let's say, owners, like the owner field, first by team and then by user or something like that.
Mhm.
So as you go and explore the owner to see who you're going to assign that to, you will see the names of the teams, and then you pick like, okay, Southeast team, and then that expands then the users underneath it, and then you can pick the user from there, like something like that. I think that there could be some instances where it might make sense to have a field like that, but unfortunately the only one we can use is subject, and there's only one of those in the system, so that's a pain.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
A long time ago, I think it was CRM 2013, the contracts entity, which was an out of the box entity, has been around forever. And the contract functionality for it was replaced by two entities called SLAs and entitlements. Um, Way more flexibility that we gain by not using one entity contracts for everything. And, again, those two entities are playing a role, each one of them. I think that the way I think about it is entitlements really answer the question of whether we can support this customer or not. It's just a yes or no question. You're coming in with an issue about the device that you bought, or whatever your project, or whatever question or concern you have, and where do we go to know if we are supposed to be helping this user or this customer is entitlements. How fast and how engaged and how we are going to actually be solving that problem is detailed by SLA. So having them separated, I think it was a good move. But let's talk about each one of them. How do you guys feel about the SLA functionality, and really maybe talk a little bit about the history of it, because we had a version of SLAs first that was out for like a year and a half, I feel like, or 2 years, and then we had enhanced SLAs. I think the classic SLAs at this point are deprecated, are they? And if not, like they should be. Like no one
Yeah.
should be using those.
The classic ones are still actually there, but
Wow.
they are tied to specifically just cases. The enhanced SLAs, the beauty about that is, of course, you can actually use it in other entities as well. So it you do really more veer towards enhanced SLAs. But yeah, I like SLAs. I like enhanced SLAs. I actually find that is one thing that pretty much a lot of clients do not. I won't say all. Everyone uses it. Everyone asks for it in a pre-sales engagement. But to be honest, not everyone implements it. And when they implement it, it's not always followed through, if that makes sense. So, for example, with enhanced SLAs, you have the ability to send notifications if the KPI is being approached. But that doesn't often happen. They just want to see, the countdown. But nothing actually happens if you miss that countdown.
By the way, I would like to know who's responsible for the designer side of SLAs, especially SLA items. Have you like? Can you do anything in there? There's like one line of room to do anything. It's like such a pain. Whoever did that, I mean, my God, I hope they fire this person and move them to another team, because that's the worst. Like for real. Like when I'm teaching, when I have students or whatever, I have to like apologize 1,000 times. Like, I'm sorry, I know there's no space. I got it. But it wasn't like that always. Like I feel like at the beginning you had room to do stuff. And then I don't know, an upgrade came through, and now we have like no room to add warnings and failure actions. It's the worst thing.
So the interface could definitely be a little better, but we actually use SLAs. The fund that I work for, we manage a lot of cloud. We have a lot of clients and stuff, and when they raise tickets, we use Dynamics for our ticketing system and our tracking system, and we need SLAs. We have different priorities. priority 1 needs to be responded to within 30 minutes, down to a priority 5. We need to know what's happening. We're servicing 24/7, 365 days a year. It's important for us. And also, what we really loved about the enhanced SLAs was the ability to pause it. Because if we're going out to the customer and we need some information from them in order for it, the customer knows it's a priority, but it could take them an hour to respond. It could take them a day to respond. And if our SLA kept ticking, at that point, we would have problems because it's likely we'll go outside of our SLA, and there's a whole load of ramifications. We have practices in place to regularly review all the KPIs, all of the SLAs, whether it's within or without or outside of it, and work on getting
Right.
better for it. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's very
that
helpful.
was a huge improvement from the classic SLAs, right? The ability to pause, because it's true. Like if you're committing to resolving an issue within 24 hours, but then you need help from a customer. Let's say you need their, I don't know, their username and password just to name something, just to be able to test something or whatever, and they take 3 days to respond. Now it shows that it took you 4 days to fix the issue, whereas it really just took you 6 hours, but you were just waiting for your customer. So people complain about that. They say this is not realistic. You're telling me that it took me a week to resolve something that I really just worked on for 6 hours. So that's not cool. And the other thing was the SLA status, current status, and even the status after the case was resolved in terms of cases was always one, which means you can just straight up awfully violate the first SLA, like the warning. You can completely mess that up, but then if you resolve it on time, it shows like you did a great job. So if, for example, you had, let's say, a day to respond and it took you 5 days to respond, and then all of a sudden you solve it really quick, it will say that, oh, it only took you 2 hours to solve it. Good job. But, it missed out on the fact that we horribly missed the fact that we didn't contact them. The enhanced SLAs keeps track of each one of those events and shows you that, yeah, you messed up on this one, but you actually did good on that one or whatever.
Yeah.
However, I personally, I don't know, maybe this is me. You guys can speak for yourselves, but I personally struggle with a good way to show that in dashboards and charts and reports. I haven't really found an easy way to show SLA related information. At least out of the box, there's not a whole lot
No,
there that we can use to report anything.
no, we use we use Power BI.
Power BI,
Yeah, we use custom dashboards and charts and things on the data because, as you say, out of the box is not particularly good.
right?
Mm. Yeah, I struggle with using it for reporting.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, so the other side of SLAs, and by the way, SLAs are optional when it comes to leveraging cases. The other side of it is the functionality that answers the question, should we be supporting this customer? And that's entitlements. Entitlements is simple. Are you entitled to receive support from us? And once again, this is optional, just like SLAs, but entitlements are pretty much the way I think about it. And I tell my customers is it's a support agreement, right? You have a support agreement for a year, 6 months, whatever it is. You are entitled to these many hours of support or these many tickets to open or whatever it is. And they are a lot simpler than SLAs, although they have their own little complexity. Like, for example, I love the options where you have to pick whether you're going to allow cases to be created if the entitlement terms have been, satisfied or completed. So you can pick yes or no. Are there any products in particular that should be enforced against this entitlement? Meaning, if you're not picking a product on the case entity that is on the list of products for that entitlement and that customer, the case, you cannot even save it. Also, people, you can add people, specific contacts that can open cases. And lastly, I think is channels, right? So can you open tickets via email or phone call or Facebook or whatever? So you can specify those channels, and you can get pretty intricate. You can say only these two people can open tickets via Facebook about this one product. You can get really, really detailed with it, which I love. But once again, I think that we need, in my opinion, we need an enhanced entitlements. I think we need more than that. There's really no easy way for us to pick, for example, that you have access to, let's say, 10 cases a month. That's not a thing. If you have a year contract and your contract is 10 cases a month, you have to say 120 for the year. There's no way to split it. There's lack of flexibility too about entitlements. But in their defense, they haven't really been upgraded since they were released. What do you guys
True.
think about entitlements?
So, for entitlements, I think that I agree. I actually quite enjoy them, but it does have limitations, especially with how we are now creating cases. More and more, we're actually veering towards a social. The social means of creating cases, that's by like your Facebook, your Twitter, etc. And although they have the ability to actually mark those as channels, it's not enforced. It has to be enforced by an agent perspective, and you actually see it in reporting, and it's all based on the source of the case. I personally wish that there was a way in which you could actually, from the front, actually stop those cases and notify the agent without having to code it that this person is out of their entitlement from before before the case is actually created. And I don't know how that would work, but that's what I would love to see, based on requirements that I keep getting from customers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they lose a lot of money that way because agents will try to help out. And it's just like they help them and then we can't create the case, and you've already helped them.
Yeah, and there's also, when you're creating an entitlement, you get to decide whether the terms will be decreased upon the creation of the case or upon resolving the case.
Yeah.
And what happens sometimes is companies just leave it by default on when the case is resolved. They're like, well, we can't really take it off before we actually help them. So they leave it on that. And what happens is sometimes you have customers that have like one or two terms left. Let's say if you're talking about cases, and then they can open 5, 6, 7, 10 tickets because as long as they're not resolved, they're not discounting them from the list of the one or two they have left. So you could be working in many of them, even though the terms actually specify you only have one or two left. So it gets complicated, and it's also complex because I have customers and they say, "Yeah, but that's not a problem. We on our contract it says that if they go over, we'll just invoice them for whatever they went over, and they sign it and they agree. I hope they go over. Like I have customers that say, I hope they go over. We have it, we're giving them an hour at X amount for the month. They have a quota, and if they go over, we can charge full price for the hour. So I hope they go over. But entitlements are not that flexible when it comes to going over. And not
Hmm.
only that, but it's not easy to report that he went over. Like it's not easy to just be like, oh, give me a report of all the customers that went over so I can invoice them. That's not
Yes,
really a thing.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I feel that they should, hire Trisha to shape, the entitlements and just
I fully
get it
support that
right.
one, Gus. I support that one.
Exactly. All right. So number 5 on our list is queues. Queues have been around forever in Dynamics, and I actually find them useful, very useful in some cases because it is the only place in Dynamics where you can actually show multiple records from different entities in one place. Tell me any other place in Dynamics where you can have a list that includes leads and contacts and emails and cases and tasks all combined in one place. That's just not a thing anywhere else but leads. So in some cases, I see the benefit of it. Now, some people might say, when will you ever need to see emails and tasks and and cases and all in one place? But the point is, queues can be pretty useful, but you have to know how to use them, right? You have to be able to add cases and then select the case and click on pick so it knows that you're working on it. And there's some functionality about it. It's not as easy and as seamless for users to figure it out. You have to train them. This is not one of those where you can just learn as you go type of thing. What do you guys think about queues?
I think they're great. Um, I mean, look,
All right.
essentially, it's proper case management. It allows moving things through workflow, moving things through the ability to specify different stages for it. You can assign it to different people who can put it onto a subject matter expert and reassign it if necessary if they don't need to. So there's that triage involved in it. And again, you get all of that information along the way. All the communications, all the notes. It's all in one central place. Um, they
I
don't need
love
to
it.
go hitting around the system.
I have a problem with it.
Mm. Okay,
No,
let's hear it.
I do love I do love queues. I use it pretty much every customer service opportunity, every single customer service implementation I've ever done. We've implemented queues
Oh
and it
wow.
works. But what the problem I have is actually more geared towards like the newer release, like D365, and actually since customer service workspace has come about. The last implementation that I actually did was for a local council, and we had to use queues because it was for contact tracing. So we wanted to see the list of list of contacts coming in, and we used the customer service workspace. The problem is customer service workspace only works with actual records. So imagine this. You are an agent. You want to basically see your list of items coming in. You're not using the omni-channel agent dashboard because you're not using omni-channel. You want to use the multi-session, multi-tabbed experience so you can get through your calls. But your calls and your cases are being automatically routed to a queue, and you cannot use queues with the customer service workspace, which is a bugbear of mine.
Wow. That's interesting. For me, I'm always kind of careful about queues because I feel that queues is a requirement that comes up in every implementation of customer service. But in a lot of those cases, a view is what they mean by a queue.
Mhm.
They just say something like, "Oh, we need to see a queue of high priority cases," and then I create a view of high priority cases, and they're like, "That's exactly what I need." And it's just a view; it's not really queues. Um, the queue functionality, I only like to implement it when I'm gonna take advantage of the picking and releasing cases and be able to drop things into queues. So be able to categorize something and say it's a high priority case, but is on the queue for development or something like that, and be able to use those categories. Other than that, I try to stick with views, to be honest, because views are pretty straightforward. It's just a list of records that match a specific criteria. So in a lot of cases, when customers talk about queues, they're talking about views. They just want a list of records that have something in common.
The
Um,
one other reason I would add to that is definitely use queues, and this is one of the reasons that we had to use it to identify the bottlenecks. For example, how long has it actually been there? Because it
yeah,
has. But for example, in this instance, it had to be dealt with within 2 to 3 hours. So in a view, you're not going to know. You don't have that traceability, but with a queue, you will because you know when it's entered and you know when it's left. Well, not
that's
really when
awesome.
it's left, but definitely when it's entered.
The other thing about queues that I like is the fact that if you place a record in a queue, the ownership doesn't change.
Mm,
So I can have me as the owner of a record, but I need somebody to sign off on it. Let's just say. So let's say I'm doing a case that has a refund, okay, and I cannot approve refunds. It has to be my manager or the CEO of the company or whatever. So I can take that case and not assign it to that person and say you're the new owner, you deal with it. Just put it on the queue. They can open it, sign off on it, whatever that means, and then it still belongs to me. Still my responsibility to close that case. So putting cases on queues doesn't change the owner, which I really like that functionality whenever it happens. Because once in a while, again, you get a project like that where it's like, well, we don't want to change owners. We just want to have a way to tell that person that is we're waiting on them for something. Great,
yeah.
queues can do that. Um, and fortunately, out of the box, every time you create a user, a private queue is created for that user, so you can dump stuff in people's queues. As long as you do the training, they know how to deal with that.
I don't actually know why that is though, because you're not going to need a queue for every single user in the system.
I know, and you can't remove them or do anything. It
You
just
can't
exists.
know. Yeah, I never
I
got
know.
that.
It's a pain. The other thing that's interesting about queues is that you can give queues an email. And this is going to connect into our next topic, which is case creation and case routing. Um, in Dynamics or in the Power Platform, there's ways for us to create case creation rules and case routing rules that theoretically says if an email comes into support at contoso.com, then it should create a case and connect that email to the case. That's the way it's supposed to work, and it works pretty good for the most part. Um, I found some challenges with that, but I want you guys to talk about that. If you have implemented this functionality, What do you think about it? What have you seen there in the real world in terms of case creation rules, for example?
Well, for case creation rules, I've literally just implemented it today, and it
Wow.
always surprises me. Like it's for some reason it's sometimes tricky to set up, um, but it shouldn't be. I feel like it's just me. That finds it tricky sometimes because the routing rule, like the not the routing rules, but the how would you put this? I think you have to set rules, don't you? Like I had to put some rules into what to create and how to create it. I
Right.
did notice that there was something new to trigger a flow. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool, and I need to test that. So I haven't tested that yet. But going back to my experience with it, it's pretty straightforward. It used to be done by a workflow, and all it's really doing is triggering a workflow in the back end. It's just
Correct.
for
It's a
me,
pretty way to create a workflow.
yeah, it's just a pretty way to create that workflow. I personally would love an easier way to kind of map things, like to say, okay, this is the email, the originating email, because you can actually create it from other activities as well, but we tend to use emails for it. This is this the email message? It goes to the description, or it might go to another field, but I haven't actually mapped it to the actual case in terms of these are where those fields should go. I haven't done that. That's what I would like to do.
That would be awesome, and also have a little bit more flexibility on the rules themselves. I mean, I think essentially all you're saying is when an email comes in, create it, and you can either assign it to a team or you can put it on a queue. Like those are like the only options. But it's always interesting because when you talk to customers, they'll say something like, look, if somebody emails support at contoso.com, it needs to create a case. But if it's a high priority email, then it should be a high priority case. But if they CC their salesperson, then that salesperson should also get an email letting them know that a case was created. Like, and you start going into these like a little bit. It's not even super complex.
Extra.
Like I know some companies are like, if it comes after hours, then it should do this. If it comes between 9 and 5, like those are not things that are hard to expect from companies. And there's literally no answer from from the case creation rules perspective. It's sort of like a caveman thing. Like it comes into the email, it creates the case. That's the best I can do. Anything beyond that, forget it. Which is a
So
pain. Obviously, we can
actually,
resolve it with flow. We can resolve it with other things. But go ahead, Trisha.
yeah. So what I was saying was, the routing rules, for example, like that. If you create multiple routing rules, it actually triggers in terms of that order. So you've actually also got to make sure that you create the routing rules in order. Otherwise, it will go horribly wrong. And there should be a way to actually manually set the order as opposed to having to create them in that order. It's the most frustratingly annoying thing. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and I remember when they had Dynamics marketing, which used to be Marketing Pilot before the current Dynamics marketing thing. They had created this thing where you can create campaigns, and I don't know if you guys mess with that, but it was like this like story, like it was like an email comes in and that creates a lead and that whatever, and it was like this path that you could create. It was
Mhm.
pretty cool. Like they designed this thing from scratch, and I think that was the basis for like business rules, like the new editors for business rules and business process flow. But I would have loved to see that for case creation and case routing rules. We are kind of stuck with the old school stuff, but you're right, that order thing can mess things up really bad.
It can definitely mess things up. I mean, it'll be nice to see what they come out with when they choose to upgrade it. From our point of view, we allow clients to specify their own priorities when stuff comes in, but we don't automatically put in queues because everybody likes having their issue being immediate response. So it comes in with what the customer has marked it as, and then we perform an initial triage and review of it. So we just create an initial case with some information against it, we review it, and then we assign it to a specific queue. We don't let it automatically go through because otherwise we'll just be slammed. And again, talking about things like KPIs and SLAs and stuff, which automatically work off the back of that, it wouldn't be pretty.
Makes sense.
Mm.
A lot of the
And then the other
functionality
thing as
in the
well,
case
oh, sorry.
entity. Oh, Trisha, go ahead.
Sorry. Now it's just I'm talking about the actual routing rules after you create the case, because I like how they've opened up routing rules. The problem is, of course, within customer service, it's not always going to be that you need to assign a case. Sometimes you need to assign other things as well. When it's created, and the routing rules will allow you to do that, but it's not. I would like it to be a bit more straightforward. So right now, for example, you can actually trigger it off by this bound, is it unbound action? But it it's just not easy to configure, and I want them to actually make it uniform and have everything in the interface, just like standard cases.
I think they should do something to make sure that the everyone calls it routing rules to make it less confusing. Mainly because the people working on this stuff are American, and we should just go with the routing, not the routing. Rules. Actually, you know what? The people working on this are Indian, so that's never
You're
mind.
opening up a
That
can
doesn't
of
apply.
worms here, guys. You're opening up a can of worms.
Yeah,
It is
tomato,
Azure or is it
tomato,
Azure?
tomato,
It's
tomato.
Asher. Come on.
I say
It's like
Azure.
we had this discussion about about Z and Z. And I'm like, come on, how do you call Beyonce's husband? It's Jay Z, not Jay said.
Jay
So,
Z.
it's Z, not said.
Yeah.
Exactly, Jay Z. There you go. Good job. Okay, moving on into actually talking about dynamics again. A lot of the functionality in cases, knowledge base we already talked about, is directly connected to the idea of showing the capabilities of customer service cases and whatnot inside of a portal to allow people to submit their cases, to allow people to follow up, with their cases, read their answers, whatever, get help and whatnot. Um, it honestly, when Microsoft acquired ADX Studio, um, the the sentiment was like, okay, finally, every single customer service implementation will deploy with a customer service portal as well, because portals were pretty much included with the licensing, right? One portal was included, 500,000 visits a month, which was enough for everybody. But how often are actually portals being deployed on customer service implementation? So, guys, go ahead and talk about customer service
I heard
portals.
I heard
Rarely.
EY just cough, and I'm
They're,
like,
they're deployed rarely.
you know where that's going.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
took a
So we
dive.
we
It
deploy
took
them
a
very rarely.
dive. No, saying that it took a dive. No, so I was just basically laughing at what you were saying, because like you basically laughed, and I knew exactly where you were going, because after Microsoft bought ADX and then changed the licensing structure, that was it. Like, it's just too
Yeah,
expensive.
It is unbelievable
licensing
because it was free.
licensing is an absolute killer around it, but let's be honest. There's still a massive amount of legacy code under the hood, and if you look at what you can do with a custom website, and there are a couple of third-party products out there as well. And again, leaving aside the licensing, but what you can actually do with it, and the look and feel, and the customization that you can do. Unfortunately, portals at this point in time just doesn't cut the biscuit. Customers look at it and they
You
see the
sure?
functionality and the limitations, like, we're going to go down a custom website route.
Wow, that's interesting.
Actually, that's very interesting, because I've actually been able to take the portal, change it. You don't even know that you're using a portal, and this is actually after ADX. Actually, before and after ADX. So I've done ADX portals and D365 portals. I haven't actually implemented Power Apps portals, and in both instances, I think it's actually quicker to implement that than to actually have to sit and build an entire custom website and get it integrated with Dynamics, which I've also done. And it took over 2 years to do that. Versus the accelerated version of implementing a portal. The only blocker for me with actually using a portal now is cost. Otherwise, I would totally recommend it.
Yeah, the current licensing for portals doesn't really help a whole lot when it comes to selling it and selling the benefits to our customers. I feel that until recently, when like one portal was included, and I think the other portal was like $500 a month or something. It was like a flat rate. It was a lot easier to do it. But still, today we still see a lot of interest for portals. However, more than just submitting cases, I think that the interest is for customers to be able to log in and see their history, right? I just want to
Yeah.
see how often did I get help last year? How much, did I spend in support? Showing a lot of information. Like, for example, we like to show customer assets, right? If you're connected through field service, let me show your assets, how often we service them, which ones broke over time, what repairs were done, who came to on site, at what time, what day, what was done, like everything. Customers really like to go that route, and I think that their customers get so much benefit that even though Power Portals are a lot more expensive than the previous Dynamics portals, we still see customers getting a lot of value from it. Also, and I want to give a shout out to Nick Hayduke at Engineer Code. He is the one that we work with. Elevate Solutions, my company. We work with Nick every time we hear anyone that wants a portal. I know I got to get Nick involved. He's amazing at what he does. So I feel like in a lot of cases is about having someone that has that knowledge, because for me, like, I can talk about the benefits of a portal, but when it comes to really figuring out whether you need a custom website, for example, versus using Power Portals out of the box, you really need someone that knows what they're doing. And obviously, Nick is not the only one. He's one of 3 hosts of the Portal podcast. Whatever that is, what was it called? Reset the Cache, I think is the name of it. For those guys, apparently all portal experts are in Canada. By the way, there's no portal
Yeah,
experts anywhere else
that's true.
outside
That's
of
true.
Canada. They have total like empire
Well, you've
in
heard of the
Canada when
portal,
it comes to portals.
the portal connector or whatever the company's called. They're based in
Yes,
Canada. They're based in Canada.
yeah. What's up with that? Canada just it's just bossing everyone around when it comes to portals, and
Yeah.
I don't understand why. But anyway, so yeah, just get someone anytime you go into portals, just working with someone who's knowledgeable on them. It seems to work well. If I've done again 50 customer service implementations and I've done portals and 10 to 15 of them, they've all been successful because I'm not the one doing it. I like to bring someone who knows what they're doing, and they seem to work well.
Yeah, and I just hope that Microsoft does something around the licensing. I worked on a
I
couple of
love that.
projects. Again, things like local authority in the education space, where you're going to have tens of thousands of logins a month.
Yeah,
Something just needs to be done about that.
that conversation about licensing is sort of like the customer's like, so how much is it going to cost me to have this portal? Money, like, I don't know. X amount of money, who knows? Like, no one knows, because it's based on the amount of logins, which can be anything. And the idea of a portal obviously is for people to come in and kind of self-help, right? So you don't have to have a
Yeah.
ton of agents answering questions and solving problems. But if at the same time everyone is costing you $20 to $30 for every case you resolve through the portal, then might as well just have people and no portal. So
Yeah.
it's rough. But yeah, I wonder
Yeah.
why they changed that. I mean, they went polar opposites with the cost. I don't know. We're getting close to the end of the list. Let's talk about number 8, which is holiday and customer service schedules. There are in the service management section within Dynamics, in the settings. And the idea behind these is that you are able to specify, customer service and holiday schedules that you can then map to an SLA, for example. And you can say, look, I'm going to resolve your case within 48 hours. But then SLAs, you can pick these schedules. So then the days that you're out of the office don't count, something like that. And obviously, if you're trying to book a service, like if you're using field service and stuff like that, they are supposed to see that, oh, it's a holiday and this person is out, something like that, and not let you book a work order on those days. Have you guys used holiday and customer service schedule in the past?
I've used the business, well, I've used the business calendar, which is what it was called the last time I actually implemented it. And the reason I used it was because we were still using the service calendar, and we wanted to basically make sure that obviously you could book an agent or anyone when they weren't available. So it still wasn't actually what's not what you have now for scheduling, and what you have now for holiday booking. But it was kind of like the old school old school holiday calendar and booking. Now what we did recently is we actually used it to create an add-on to customer service where, for example, this is now available, but when Omnichannel was first launched, you had the out of hours. And the out of hours was basically just a global. What it did was it just hid the chat button, which was quite rubbish. But they've changed it, and now it actually does show you a message to say, "Hey, we're out of, we're not." We're not actually available. So what we did was we created a custom bot that would actually look at the calendar and see if you're actually in work, for the agent, or see if the actual um, organization was in work at that moment, or was it a holiday, and then it would give the next available date that they were available and then show that. So that's how we built on top of that to kind of extend the functionality of what was available at that time. But now, I mean, they've added that functionality in a way. So yeah, it's not that used anymore, but yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, that was back in the day of the service calendar, and you had to go into like every user account and specify their working hours and vacation hours and stuff like that because
Yep.
the service calendar was pulling from that list to see who was available and when. And if you try to schedule like a service activity during their time off, it would tell you like this user is not available. That was kind of cool. And I thought that, the service calendar for once, which we don't have anymore, rest in peace, that was the one piece in Dynamics as far as I understand. I'm not a historian when it comes to Dynamics 365, but I've heard that the service calendar was the main component preventing the cross browser compatibility back in the day. Like before they released it, they could not get the service calendar to work in other browsers outside of IE, Internet
Wow,
Explorer. So yeah, they
that's
couldn't get it.
crazy.
I know they had to rewrite it from scratch to work on all the other browsers. But what I remember is that when they rewrote it, I mean, it looked the same, but it actually worked. Like, I don't know if you remember, but you can put like service activities and they will have different colors. Like, you could say, like, oh, this patient just arrived into the office or waiting for a doctor or whatever. And then when they were with the doctor, it would change to different colors. And like all of the service calendar will light up with all these different colors, every color meaning something different. Like, that stuff never worked before like cross browser compatibility was introduced. And I think because they had to rewrite it, they actually fixed that in the process, and it worked pretty well. But now it was replaced by the new functionality, which we're going to talk about next. But EY, do you have any experience with the holiday and customer service schedules?
So similar to Trisha, and things like omnichannel and stuff, been using it in terms of company hours, whereby it's possible to see if they're there or not, and put custom messages depending on it. So, sort of it's lunchtime, people aren't around, to it's the weekend, or please contact us via email and things like that. So definitely finding it. Haven't deployed it a massive amount, but seeing
Mhm.
potential on a couple of projects for being able to put it in.
Yeah, and if you offer SLAs in different types, like maybe you have an SLA that is 24/7, something like your platinum SLA, and then you have gold that is like 9 to 9 or 9 to 5, and those ones actually observe weekends and holidays and stuff like that. Then having multiple holidays and customer service schedule help with that because you can connect them to the SLAs.
Indeed,
Um,
you can.
yeah,
And it's
but
also
before.
possible to get Power Virtual Agents to pick up on
Mhm.
it. So Power Virtual Agents, they could, there's the ability to escalate to a live person through the customer service omnichannel, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
they can read from, again, the calendar board and see what's there. And if it's out of hours, it won't give you the option to escalate it. They can suggest something else. So again,
That's awesome.
very useful for that sort of thing. People aren't frustrated that they're transferred and they're hanging on because there's nobody at the other end.
For sure. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
need to have
So
you
let's
need
talk
to have a
about,
skill for
you
that.
know, yeah, definitely.
No, just
Let's talk
yeah.
about what replaced the service calendar, which was scheduling. Now we have a whole section for scheduling, which basically came from field service. It looks like, and we have it's like a toned down version of the field service scheduling, where you have to have characteristics and you have to have all these other stuff in order to be able to book something. It's easier, but I personally haven't really used a whole lot of the new scheduling capabilities in Dynamics. Can you guys talk a little bit about that and whether you're using them or some of your customers are using them?
I'm hoping that Tricia has something around this because we haven't used it at all so far.
I've used the older version, the service calendar. I seem to have used that
Mhm.
quite a lot. The newer version for customer service, I've not used. Obviously, there are some components of the service calendar which Omni also uses. For example, for skills-based routing, for example, resources, characteristics, they're used in Omni. So we kind of take pieces of that for that. But the actual calendar itself we haven't used. But one thing though, I definitely know I was looking for and I didn't see that I was kind of hoping would be there is that personal calendar where I, as an agent or I, as a customer service person, would be able to go and actually see my list of appointments as opposed to just, the general team's calendar. Because I definitely know that what's happening now is they have to flick between CE and, like Outlook and they live in CE, so they don't really want to have to be flicking between two systems. So that's definitely something that I think is missing.
Right. I am hoping for the opportunity to do a project where it's heavily based on the new scheduling component, because I think that's the best way to learn it is to actually go and implement it and see everything that you can do with it.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the field service version of it, which has more capabilities. But this seems to be, and it's, if you guys want to check it out listening to this, just go and check the customer service hub application that comes with Dynamics 365. You can do this on a trial too, and you will see it. Is there's a section called scheduling, and you go in there and you have schedule activities. You have the actual scheduling component, the calendar. Let's just say, which is heavily based on the field service calendar. So I'm actually waiting and hoping that I get a project where I get to implement it, because it's so new. Like no one can come here and claim that they've done 50 implementations of the scheduling component. I mean, this is so new. But it would be interesting to learn more about it. I'm excited about it. I do want to wrap up this episode talking about a
Definitely.
piece of functionality that was introduced a few years ago that I actually think is highly valuable for some customers, and I've done several implementations of it. I'm hoping that you guys have done this as well, because I want to hear some examples of where you use it. But that is the ability of linking cases as a parent and child relationship, having a parent problem, whatever that means, and then having a bunch of other cases below that are child cases to a parent. And that comes with its own advantages. Like, for example, you can say, I'm not allowed to close the parent case until all the child cases below are resolved. Or you can say, if I resolve the parent case, all the child cases below should be resolved automatically, something like that. There are different situations where you would use one or the other. Have you guys implemented parent child case relationships, and give me some examples?
We have done so. Haha, see, I gave that one to you. So again, with our service desk, so we maintain a load of traditional hardware as well, including network routing and WANs and secure WANs and with VPNs and stuff. So we're responsible for the wiring and stuff. We've got teams that would go out and wire hardware in and lay down wiring and networking and stuff. Now, if there's an outage, we had a bulldozer, right? Went over the wrong wires and digging the road up and it did stuff. And suddenly our switchboard, the phones start lighting up in our support center and emails start coming in, customer after customer after customer that's served by that central location. So when the first one comes in, we open a case for it. We get a couple in, we open cases for it. when we realize, I mean, it's sort of a common sense tipping point, but we realize it's all connected. They're all in that same location. We open a parent case for it. We associate everything for that. And we have automatic notifications that we know when we've then got it fixed, we can then resolve it, and it sends out to everybody, because there could be hundreds of different cases, hundreds of clients. If you think of large office blocks, obviously people are working from home at the moment, but traditionally and stuff, hundreds of different companies that could knock that out. We don't want to be closing each one individually. We want to be able to say we've resolved it. We've got, the network back up and running. The internet is back up. All your systems are now good to go. We've resolved it. Hit one button on a parent case and it can send out notifications to everybody. So that was an absolute godsend for us.
That is awesome. Trisha, do you have any examples?
Yeah, so I actually have an interesting one. The how I got when it first came, because this is not new, this functionality, but before it came about, we had to implement something quite similar on a project, and it was a membership subscription service, and they delivered their subscriptions, and then if you didn't get it, then you'd call in to the call center. But what happened was we had to implement like the a way to replicate that same functionality before it became an actual piece of Dynamics. We implemented it using relationships, and also a plugin that would actually go through and pretty much do what you I just mentioned. So when Microsoft came with this functionality, it basically meant that we obviously had technical debt. We had to strip everything out and say, okay, you should be using this. This is what you should use. But to be honest, it's just when you're refactoring it and actually just putting it in to be standard, it feels so good because it's like it's just less code and you feel it just makes the solution so much lighter and just so much easier to support and use. So like it's something that I don't think a lot of people use because that was actually the only customer that I implemented that for. But I think that is something that everybody should be aware of because even now with the whole customer service insights, where you're able to kind of see the trend and see, okay, you know, you are getting more and more cases with this type. That is a total indicator that you should probably have a pairing case, isn't it? But guess what?
Yeah.
You don't really think of implementing the parent case hierarchy. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of scenarios where this is beneficial. I'll just mention the last two that we did, the last two implementations that we did that leverage this functionality. One was a company that sells and implements and maintains medical equipment. What we've done is that if customers with a specific device start calling in, let's say I don't know X-ray 123 machine, they start calling in for a problem, and even if they're different customers, right, from different, they don't even know each other, but there's a trigger that says if 5 cases within a certain period of time, I think is a week, come in for the same product from different customers and is the same type of issue, then we're going to create a parent case to investigate further. Maybe we have to do a recall. Maybe we have to, go and fix them all, whatever it is. But we're starting to see a pattern. So they create parent cases when they start identifying patterns, and they literally say, we're not going to close this case until we resolve all the child records or all the child cases below it. And then the other one is similar to that, but they deal with insurance. So if somebody calls because they hire somebody and they say, look, I hired this person, they have a wife and 2 kids and they need to be added to an insurance, a case is created, and then a child case is created for each individual. So you have to go one by one and add them to the insurance and then close them all in order to be able to close the top case that was, the original request. So they want to know who closed all of them and at what time and how long it took and just all the information. So they do it that way. Like you said, Trisha, I agree with you. I think that a lot of organizations out there are missing out on how valuable relating parent and child cases can be in a lot of different scenarios. I think that they're just using individual cases, and they are maybe linking them at the customer level. Like, let me go to the customer and see all the cases below. But there's a ton of different scenarios where having this relationship between parent and child will be highly beneficial. And I think a lot of companies are missing out on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that insurance one was really interesting. I've never thought of it like that. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys for joining me on the show today. If people have questions or comments about, some of the things that you talked about, what is the easiest way to get in contact with you? Start with you, Mr. CRM Ninja.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter as the CRM Ninja, or feel free to reach out my blog, the CRM.ninja.
You also have a pretty cool video series, right, on your YouTube channel where you interview, I think it's called the Oops Factor, right?
It is called the Oops Factor. It's where people share situations where problems have happened and lessons learned.
I know. I know that I was a guest in one of your shows. I don't remember which one I talked about. There's several that I could have talked about, but definitely encourage people to go there because I think we can learn a lot from mistakes and times where projects did not go as planned. We can learn a lot from that. I think that in a lot of cases, when it comes to dynamics and implementing, for those of us who implement dynamics as a full time job, you either win or you learn, right? So you either do a good job and everything goes perfect and is adopted, or you did something that didn't go as well, and then you learn so the next project is even better. Trisha, how about you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
So I do have a blog by my namesake. It's trishasinclair.com. I blog about customer service, funnily enough, omni-channel and Azure DevOps. And I can also be contacted on LinkedIn. So please follow, subscribe, and share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for being a guest on the show. If you have any questions for EY or Tricia, feel free to reach out to us at info@crmmvppodcast.com. As always, all these episodes are released on crmmvppodcast.com and our YouTube channel as well. If you want to go see, our faces, some of the episodes we actually release video with the audio, so you can go check that out and obviously comment there and ask questions. All of us that are really on the show kind of stay on top of the comments and are able to ask questions. And for those that are not staying up, I'm always reaching out and be like, "Hey, there's a question over there for you," and they can come in and answer. Like Neil Benson did that on episode 97, for example. There were a couple questions for him there. So I appreciate you guys being on the show. And I hope that people enjoy this, learning more from you about customer service. Hopefully we get to have an MVP summit in 2022 and I get to actually meet you guys in person, and all of this virtual stuff. I want to go back to the in-person events, especially the MVP summit. But once again, thank you for joining on today's episode.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for having us.